type stories and less about sort of pitching and academic education and commercialization. The event was, we think, really successful. If you were there, cool. And we had planned a number of sort of periodic happy hours and follow-ups and these sorts of things. But of course, coronavirus came over and kicked all those plans in the face. And so now we, we had to rethink what we're going to do. And of course, at the same time, this is a difficult time like this is when you need these kind of personal community engagements more than ever. People are anxious about their jobs, about their companies, the general future of commercialization and the space and all sorts of other things. And so we decided to have this meetup digitally where we can hear, a couple of diverse perspectives on what's going on in the current situation, give you guys a chance to chime in, hopefully learn something. But even if not, maybe not even those things, but just to sort of commiserate, receive some psychological relief by hearing from other people who are dealing with this stuff as well. And so we have 3 different perspectives sort of on stage today, but we will ask you guys to ask questions as well. We kind of wanted to get sort of different slices of the community, one from sort of the investment and incubator side, one from a more VC-backed startup perspective, and one from a more sort of bootstrapped perspective. And so thank you to all the speakers and all you guys attending. So I'm going to hand over the mic to Dr. Kayla Young, who has kindly agreed to moderate this event. Kayla.
Great. Thanks, Ivan. So as Ivan said, my name is Kayla Young. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Phase. So a couple of housekeeping items just before we get started. As Ivan mentioned, we had hoped to do this as an in-person happy hour, which we obviously can't, but we are hopeful that we can hold another one in the late summer, early fall, which Jessie has been kind enough to offer his beautiful space up for. And we're also still planning on holding our annual Genome Startup Day event. Also, we're hoping sometime in September, however, we all are aware of the current situation. So to keep up to date on those items, if you follow either Phase Genomics or Genome Startup Day on Twitter, we post frequently about these events. You can also subscribe at genomestartupday.com, and I now feel like some sort of pusher on the marketing front. And then additionally, the run of events, we're going to have everyone introduce themselves. Then we will go through, a panel of just discussion conversation about running a startup during a pandemic. And then we're going to end with audience questions. So at any point, if you have a question, there's a little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Just type your question in there. I will be able to see it. And then the last 15 minutes or so, we will spend answering those questions. So with that, let's get started. So Ivan, you already introduced yourself, but if we could have all the panelists go around and introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your company, and as well as what your role is at said company. And Alice, if you want to start us off, that'd be great. You're muted. Alice, you're muted. Hold on, you're still muted. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So high expectations for me, everyone. But no, thank you for having me. And I was saying thank you for Phase Genomics, Ivan, Kayla for organizing this. I first met Ivan last year when I arrived in Seattle in April of 2019 to run our Alexandria launch labs, and I can share a little bit about that. But I think just underscoring what Ivan said, for me, the startup community it's really important is that engagement piece. And now that we've removed we've introduced kind of physical distancing, I think this is kind of one of many things that can be done. I'm curious to hear from the community to understand kind of what are things that potentially we or your team, our team, someone to kind of try to convene more of these conversations, because I think this is like to kick off a long series of discussions that can be helpful to a lot of folks. So my role, I'm the site head for Alexandria Launch Labs, which is a co-working wet lab space that allows for companies to start off at 1 or 2 benches and grow into maybe 10 or 15 people. Alexandria Launch Labs is part of Alexandria Real Estate, which is a large real estate investment trust. So we build space uniquely for like for biotech companies. So our niche is lab space. So we're able to kind of ease them from, or transition them from launch labs into other spaces, because finding spaces is a really difficult and challenging kind of process. In addition to that role, I serve as a principal for our science and tech team. So science and tech encompasses both the underwriting for the tenants that move into Alexandria real estate properties, but then also our Alexandria venture investment arm. So we invest in companies as well. We in the past invested in companies that were Series A and beyond, but now we've moved earlier into the seed round as well. So I'm the point person for the Seattle region on the investment front. We invest in tech sometimes, but our main focus is generally life sciences.
Great, thank you for being here. Yeah, Jessie, you're up.
All right, my name is Jessie Salk. I am the CEO of Twinstrand Biosciences, which is a startup out of the University of Washington originally. I am come out of an academic background just like Ivan. I'm an oncologist, so I'm actually still affiliate faculty at the university, and I still see patients a little bit at the local VA hospital. So we focus on a very high accuracy sequencing method called duplex sequencing. And a lot of the applications relate to cancer diagnostics, like early detection or detection of residual cancer, but some other things as well. So I've had a chance to see COVID both from the perspective of what it's like to run a company, what it's like in the raising money time around this and after this, because I've been helping other people, I've had a lot of people reach out, and then also kind of understanding what's going on in the actual medical community. A lot of what we do in genomics in one way or another does interact with the medical community, medical research. So I've seen it in terms of availability of people from working in academic labs or drug companies. So yeah, maybe I'll have some interesting things that will be relevant.
Great, thank you. Ivan, do you want, I know you kind of introduced yourself, but talk a little bit about Phase. You're muted.
That's right. I'm back. As I said, I run Phase Genomics, and essentially, what our company does is we provide this unique technology that sort of improves discovery efforts in a wide array of biological disciplines, everything from agriculture to infectious disease and microbiome to cancer and reproductive disease. It's sort of a new, sort of an emerging technology in the sort of genome perturbation and genome assembly space. And so our company has been around about 5 years. We run primarily on revenue. And so one of the kind of, in my little early spiel about kind of having 3 different perspectives, we tend to be kind of like the more bootstrappy, smaller group. And so, and so that's sort of our perspective on that's sort of our situation in this community.
Great. So as you know, we're all here because of this pandemic. I think just to kick us off, I think, and you each kind of touched a bit about this in your introduction, but just further elaborating on specifically how this pandemic has affected your company and or portfolio companies, and then specifically what changes have been implemented as a result of this, as your operational shifts. I can call on somebody or somebody can jump in. I don't have a preference. Alice, go for it.
Yeah. Well, so while Alexandria Launch Labs is part of Alexandria as a larger company, we kind of function like a startup as well. It's me, and we were supposed to be a team of 3. So myself, our lab operations director, and then a coordinator. But when this hit, our company, big or small, I think it's like reassessing kind of what your costs are, where the expenses are, what can you control, what can't you control. And so we've taken a close look at that. So part of it, we're a co-working space, right? So you think that filling it would help increase revenue, but we have this whole physical distancing thing that we have to consider. And for me, it's way more important to consider the safety and minimizing the risk of people who are working in launch lab. So I've actually pushed out kind of when we bring in new companies in, which is a direct kind of contradiction to like wanting to increase revenue, but that's where I'd rather go and figure out where I can cut costs. So I think every company, you're going to have to figure out where you want to, like where the levers are going to be pulled and what do you value, because something's got to give. With the companies that have moved into launch labs, they are relatively well capitalized, so they haven't had as many issues. However, they are growing slower. So hiring is slower, the growth within the space is slower. We've accounted for that. So I think it's just figuring out how to lengthen your runway is kind of what the direct kind of impact that I've seen, not only with ourselves, but with the companies that are in our spaces. But everyone's been really kind of gracious and great to work with in that we're all trying to figure this out. So, you know, as we implement different policies, everyone's been really kind of forthcoming with suggestions or kind of their understanding. Like no one's like, well, why are you making me wear a mask around the space? I think it's helpful that I work with scientists, right? So we all understand why. It's not like I'm trying to make your life difficult. It's like we're trying to enable you to do work because we haven't shut down at all, in the sense that Launch Labs continues operations, but we limit the number of people that are in, only those who really need to be in the lab are in the lab. So I think being able to create an open dialogue, but actually have people understand why you are making the decision that you're making. So hopefully that helps.
That's great.
Let's see, on my end, so like I even said it, Phase is a bit more bootstrappy in terms of behaving like a small business and having, you know, a modest number of people with revenue positive projects. And we're a bit more of a startup in the more traditional sense of raising money. And with startups, typically, you know, you have a small amount of money, a few people to kind of prove something conceptually, and then you move things along and you sequentially raise more money. And then you kind of get to this point when you say, okay, we've got a product that's ready to sell, and we're going to raise a more substantial amount of money and hire a commercial team that's sales and marketing and people in the field, application scientists, to go from an R&D operation to a commercial operation. And when you do that, your costs go up a lot. And so we ourselves had closed the Series A at that transition point kind of at the end of last year. And so we, you know, when you do that, you raise that money and your biggest cost is people. Probably 2/3 of your cost is people. So you basically, you're very careful with who you hire, but when you raise that money, you start hiring people to go out and sell your thing. And so we were fortunate in that we raised the money and we closed that financing before COVID hit. But at the same time, we sort of got partway through hiring a commercial team, and then we realized, oh, we better slow down hiring too many people because I can't have salespeople out in the field. We're not sure who's going to be buying things. We're not sure if the clinical trials we're supporting are going to keep going. And so it's been a kind of a constant reassessment. I think in fairly good shape. Really over the last couple of months, we've just been figuring out, looking around and seeing what our customers are going to be doing. But we've been very careful, kind of taking a very data-driven scientific approach and saying, all right, what are all the opportunities we have? What has been, you know, adversely affected by COVID? What opportunities has COVID actually brought, and what's kind of neutral? And for our particular business, just given the people we work with, then we do some academic stuff. We certainly do. It tends to be a little bit higher end academic as opposed to, you know, John Smith, the graduate student, kind of buying a widget. It's a little bit more bigger labs usually. We found that academic labs are certainly, many of them are shut down, but there are a lot of people working from afar, writing papers, planning out their next thing, and actually planning and buying stuff. So in some ways, I've seen actually more attention from people planning out things. So that's good. We've seen some things we're about to sell or ship that they say, you know, we can't do this right now because we can't get in the lab, but you know, we're going to sort out the next thing. I've seen some clinical trials say we're having a hard time accruing patients. So actually we want to double down in companion diagnostics because we have fewer data points. We want to enrich, in those data points for things that we're doing. And there's some other groups that are kind of feel like they're completely immune from COVID, that they're considered essential and they're going forward about the same. And there's some people that are just being creative. As scientists, we're creative. Most of our customers are scientists, and they find ways of, all right, we're gonna, only work in a more spread out way, a couple of days a week. And so overall, I've been pretty nervous, and we have, there were probably 6 or 7 conferences I was planning on being at this year that I didn't. And I was thinking, boy, that's going to really impact my ability to meet people or get these things going. We've done, I think, a pretty good job adapting and reaching out to customers electronically, working with people remotely. As a company, I think it's really important. We have 36 people now. So we're getting up there, and I really worry about culture and how people interact, and are people using their time well? Are people feeling supported and motivated? And we've done a lot more Zoom type meetings. We use Slack a lot. We've had taken very conscious efforts for the people who, I basically said anybody that doesn't need to be working on site shouldn't. And so we probably had 2/3 of our people are now off site. And then the folks who are on site are lab focused and need to be there. We're considered an essential organization. We're actually doing some COVID related work. But we have pretty strict precautions and rules. So we say, we're your extended family, you're social distancing, you're either here at home, and you're not using public transportation, you're not going out and doing other things. We have people sign in every day, and they agree to these certain things. So, it's impactful because it limits sort of certain people's freedom. On the other hand, we kind of all accept the need for sort of personal, safety for everybody. And so some people are kind of at home and a little more isolated. Some people are working under these restricted conditions on site. And so I think it's really important to keep up culture. And so we have virtual happy hours. We, use a lot of, I try to do some kind of rallying emails periodically. We try to check in with people a lot more. And I've been pretty impressed with how well it's gone. It really feels like everybody kind of chips in as understanding a kind of a common challenge. And it's in some ways motivating. And it also helps, working remotely is different, but in some things are actually more effective. You choose your meetings better. You have agendas a little bit more. So while it's been challenging, and I would not have it this way if I could avoid it, I think, the people who can evolve, what is the famous Darwin quote, or the famous quote that everyone attributes to Darwin that actually wasn't said by Darwin? Something along the lines of, it's not the strongest, who succeed, it's the one who are most adaptable to change. And last time I did Google that, and it was a scam. That was never actually said by Darwin, but it sounds really good. So we're going to go with that pseudo quote. And so that's kind of how I feel. If people are feeling good, and you know that you're going to have to you have to adapt, and you're going to have to keep adapting, and you just expect that, things can go okay. I do worry. I worry that suddenly customers will dry up. I worry that somebody could get sick and we have to shut everything down completely. I worry our supply chain could get disrupted. I worry, even though we have some, runway, that we could get to a point where we're looking to raise money in the future, and even a year and a half down the road, maybe the world is a different place, and maybe people aren't putting their money in this. So, you just kind of think about it as you go. Don't panic, but at the same time, do exactly what Alice said. We have to, err on the side of caution, making sure you have enough runway. We're not hiring as aggressively as we would have otherwise. And really put in place, these kind of conditional plans. If this happens, then this. I think we're going to be okay. But if I get 3 months out and I see that, our expectations are not being met for our current projections, what is the next step you're gonna do? So you're not constantly in panic mode, but you're also kind of giving yourself a clock and a timeline to say, let's reassess my assumptions on a regular basis. So gives yourself a chunk of time to do your thing and then check in. Do your thing and check in. So those are my few words of wisdom. Ivan, what do you think?
As for us, so we're a little bit blessed that a lot of the company, the majority of the company is either computational or otherwise can work remotely. I mean, remote work is a little bit of a bummer because, you get used to seeing people and you enjoy their company, and then you can't. And of course, everybody's under a certain amount of operational stress. Um, and so right now we basically have almost nobody comes to work except for once in a while if you have to do a webinar. We keep the lab staffed at sort of skeleton crew. So essentially our lab, we have both a lab, like a wet lab and a computational component to the company. And so the lab folks, we basically have rotating schedules. So they come in one at a time. So there's only one person in the lab at a time. Sometimes there's multiple people that are here, but they have to confine to different offices and that kind of thing. And so that's sort of been the organizational impact for us. Certainly we've had to do a lot of rethinking about sort of the two elements of sort of money coming in and the costs of money going out. And there's certainly some segments, like Jessie was saying, sales has definitely been impacted. You can't have salespeople out. I had a very robust conference schedule as well, completely wiped out. And so now we have to rethink these things. We have to get creative. What do we do with our time? How do we maximize, the runway that we do have, the value? How do we find new sources of income? And so for us, for instance, we've been writing grants a lot more, which I think that's pretty common right now. I think a lot of people are writing grants like crazy. We haven't had to do major layoffs. There was a little bit of a furlough going on, but we're certainly not planning to grow and expand the team at the moment, which, sort of the reality of the day. But what's really been interesting is that this kind of forced isolation as a company, not just as humans, individuals, we really got a chance to really refocus attention on the core of the company, right? So what are the main value props? What are we developing? One of my sort of most optimistic things is that we've really been able to knock out a lot of the R&D efforts that have been sort of going slower because, we're always like serving customers and stuff like that. And so being able to really turn inward and start knocking out some of these research and development efforts has really bore a lot of fruit. So that's pretty optimistic. Again, my worries are very similar to the ones Jessie has listed. What's the runway going to look like? What are the sales going to look like? Are they ever going to bounce back? How are we going to sell and market the stuff if I can't go to conferences anymore? You can only get so much traction out of Twitter. And so we think about these things, but I think, we've had sort of times of plenty and now these sort of dry times. From what I understand from speaking to a lot of more seasoned entrepreneurs is that these times present an opportunity to really focus on the core and to just go in and start innovating like crazy. And the pseudo Darwin quote that Jessie said was really apropos is really, we often have these meetings with the rest of the team. One topic that I keep bringing up is what can we do as a company? What can we change? How can we adapt so that when we emerge out of this, we're actually stronger and not that we've been hobbled? Obviously, things are not. Maybe they'll return. They probably won't ever be exactly how they have been. They'll be different, but different doesn't necessarily have to be bad. Like there are opportunities to sort of improve things, and put out things that are more interesting that we haven't necessarily been focusing on before. Like we have a big now we have sort of a virus-focused technology development effort that we're undergoing. In some part because of COVID. We're sort of investigating potential partnerships to try to utilize our technology for the benefit of the whole COVID situation, whether it be in the infectious disease space or like the human genetics, epigenetic space. And so it's stressful, but it's also sort of, it's change. It presents a possibility to actually come out better than you were before.
Great. So Jessie and Ivan, you both touched on this, and I just would like to discuss a little further, just kind of the opportunities that are presented from this otherwise very unfortunate and kind of tragic pandemic, whether that's technological or, from a company culture. And, similarly, Alice, if you're seeing any of your companies pivoting to, help solve these problems, whether it's this pandemic or future ones. I think we all operate in life sciences with a intention of, providing some sort of greater good. And so, in the way that we're able to help, what opportunities have been presented.
I mean, I think that the companies that are currently in launch labs haven't pivoted. However, as Alexandria, the companies that are in our portfolio, we have probably 60 plus that have direct efforts towards COVID. I think in these stressful times, it's been really encouraging, or it's revitalized my hope hearing about how the biotech and life science and pharma kind of industry has come together, both private, public partnerships, all these things. Like, we're throwing everything we have at this. And to see that these kind of like what used to be kind of more siloed, if you want to call them that, kind of coming down on people really wanting to work together, and everyone's rooting for each other. Like, as much as even if one company's working on one thing, they're not trying like rooting for the demise of like some other person's effort. We're just hoping someone comes up with something. So I think given that there was a lot of negative press around kind of biotech and pharma, the past few years, I'm hoping that this allows to really underscore the people that, like all of us, we're scientists by training. We got into this because we want to see science do better for the world. And hopefully, with this kind of communal and collective effort, we'll be able to kind of really shine a light on what the intentions are of our industry as a whole.
Yeah, from Twinstrand, from my side, one thing I absolutely agree with Ivan about the opportunity to do foundational building and look inward. For us, we've had so much interest in different things over, people coming with different questions or ideas or wanting this or that, we've been trying to be very careful in general in the past about getting spread too thin, trying to take on too many different things. And we've sort of had more of an opportunity now to say, okay, we're gonna, rather than us having to keep shaking the tree and having more stuff fall off of it, take what we have in hand and really do a good job to build foundational pieces. So, get your good website together. We have time to actually, do that while we're not dealing with a bunch of customer stuff. Get some of our software pieces built. Look at all these new tools and things we have on the kind of back burner that are not even necessarily kind of new cutting edge, exciting products, but just things that let us operate faster. Having an order collection system, having our marketing kind of materials together. So I think that actually really is important because it's a forced pause to kind of catch up. In terms of COVID, especially coming from the medical side, I see what's going on. I don't do critical care medicine anymore, so I'm not working in ICU, but I'm doing, I'm an oncologist. This definitely affects different folks. From a biological perspective, coronavirus is a single-stranded RNA virus. We do something called duplex sequencing, which involves double-stranded DNA. And so at the very beginning, everybody said, "Oh, can you do some, COVID-related thing?" I was like, "Yeah, well, sort of theoretically, but it's a single-stranded RNA virus. It's not double-stranded DNA." But thinking about that as we've been going along, there've actually been some really interesting opportunities that have come out. One thing that we do is this is a very, very high accuracy sequencing method that lets us get error rates below 1 in 10 million. And one of the things we've been doing for quite some time is being able to detect mutagenesis, that I can sequence DNA with error rates that low that I can actually directly see if certain chemicals are mutagens. Like, I can tell about how old you are if I look in your blood and look at levels of mutations. And I know about how old you are. I can predict if you're a smoker, not a smoker, that kind of thing. And we're using that for a lot of preclinical drug development and other stuff in animals or cell culture. But one person from NIH came to me not long ago and said, "Look, we've got this really, really promising new drug. It's a nucleoside analog. It's a ribonucleotide analog that causes, the mechanism is it causes lethal mutagenesis in the virus. It gets incorporated into the viral RNA, and as it sort of replicates, it sort of mutagenizes this to death. And it works great in rodents, and we're going into accelerated human trials now. But we don't have time to do a 2-year animal study to see if this is safe or can cause cancer. And like mechanistically, it's literally, it's a mutagen. It's meant to work that way. you know, can this end up getting into, you know, human genome and being a mutagenic thing? And could you do something with that? And the answer is, yeah, actually we could. So we're going to be running samples for a human clinical trial, looking at, you know, DNA from these patients, blood and urine, and seeing if this, you know, could get incorporated. And if it is, there's sort of ways you could actually probably modulate that. So at the same time, there are people who are critically ill in an ICU and other, you know, institutions undergoing these studies. We're going to be getting samples and actually doing something that's really never been possible before. It's related to something we were doing before, and it feels really good because it's, you know, it's meaningfully contributing. It's actionable information, and, you know, I kind of keep opportunities out for that. There are ways of looking at viral evolution, not just between people, but within a given exposure. Say somebody's infected and you give a drug, and you can actually see in real time selection for resistance variants. And so having that information from you know, cDNA can give some indication of regimens that would you know, be more effective and suppress resistance more. So, you know, again, being kind of creative. It might be direct like that. It may be kind of indirect, like the mutagenesis thing. I'm cautious about just jumping completely onto this. I've seen this happen in the past where there was, you know, a bioterrorism scare, the anthrax, and everybody just sort of went out and started looking at anthrax. And you're like, come on, guys, like, we're doing science, and it's just like you follow the money. So at a company, you need to both follow the money and the immediate need, but also know that, you know, what if there's a great vaccine that shows up in 8 months? You've pivoted everything to doing this one really narrow thing, or someone else comes up with a better solution. So in those two cases, it was helping, it's relevant, it's addressing it, but it's also using our core technology for what we are. So don't let yourself go too far down the rabbit hole, because when you get to the other side, you'll just be like, man, I'm in the bottom of this rabbit hole, and oops. So that's my comment. Ivan?
Yeah, I think that's, just to add a comment, I think that's a really good point. I think as one thinks about alternatives, it's like, know where your North Star is and build things that may be kind of tangential, but towards that North Star. Because if you go down, you know, for us, like, we have space, but there we want kind of the most exciting companies like in the region. And it's not about, okay, now just rent it to anyone who like can write a check. Mm-hmm. And like staying true to your core, but know how to kind of paint outside the lines a little bit, is that balance that everyone will have to strike. So thanks for making that point.
Ivan, do you have anything to add?
I like it.
Ivan, do you have anything to add?
Do you want to move to another question, just because we're...
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have some good attendee questions. So the first one is, do you see yourself making long-term changes in any of your operational approaches or strategies as a result of what we've learned from these adjustments?
For me, to be honest, I'm not sure we know yet what we have learned. It's, we're still experimenting and making. I mean, I think some of the things we've learned is, you know, how important communication is with a team. Like little things like when you have team meetings, have people turn their cameras on, you know, it just changes the world. I don't know how deeply that, I mean, those are things we can learn quickly, but a lot of the other changes, I feel like it's still a little bit early to say how impactful they'll be. I mean, most certainly we will think harder about things in the future, but.
I've thought for a long time personally that I get a lot more done if I sit in a coffee shop and I don't show up to work for a while because people can't find me to bother me. And so in some ways this is great. This is kind of like that. I think when we had papers or things getting written, I tell people don't show up to work, go sit at a coffee shop and just get it done. And I think more people are seeing the value of that. I think that's one thing that's important. I save a lot of time not commuting. So I can imagine that people get used to and more comfortable not spending every single day constantly in an office. I think having better planning for meetings and kind of more detailed lists rather than just everybody getting in the room because they happen to all be there ends up being a better use of time. So I don't see us changing our business drastically. I see us changing, learning from this and thinking about how we can use our time more effectively. And sometimes using your time more effectively simply means, working 40 hours rather than 50 hours and spending, 10 extra hours of your family so you're rested and getting the same amount done.
Alice, do you have anything to add?
No, I think
Okay.
when you're talking about time, it's just, I think one comment for me is that my days have seemed to get longer because the lack of commute, people's kind of work hours have started to kind of spread to the periphery. And I don't have like children, so I don't know how mothers do it, but like their days have gotten really long. So if you're working with folks who have to kind of push to the side because they're taking care of their kids during the day just becomes really long. And so for me, I've had to consciously bookend kind of when I will start and when I will end, because otherwise I just keep going. And like you feel productive, but you're going to burn out. So I think being mindful of like not burning yourself out during this period of time.
And these days, my experience is it's sort of like the inverse of what Jessie was saying. People bother me all the time at home, and no one bothers me here. So it's the upside. The things have shifted, but yeah. The thing with kids is crazy. It's very disruptive. Let's
see. So another question, and we're running up on time, so this might be the last, but maybe we'll get to one after. So for those of us wanting to help in the emerging genome startup growing community growth, how can you become more involved other than attending these meetings, etc.?
Well, before coronavirus, I would say actually meet the folks and kind of have one-on-one meetings and come and chat, that sort of thing. It's a little bit harder now, but I think I think reaching out and reaching out, setting up meetings, continuing the conversation. I mean, one of the things that I worry about is because of this whole shutdown situation, people will start talking and will stop talking, will stop communicating, right? And I think keeping the lines open and just getting that network and just talking to people to as much as possible, keep that going. I think that's sort of an important factor.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to, if folks go to like the Alexandria Launch Labs website or like the Seattle one and you click, like I was thinking like of just soliciting folks to just send kind of topics that you want to talk about, and we can create like an informal kind of roundtable to kind of chat. Like someone brought up kind of the PPP loans. I know you guys can speak to it, but we surveyed all of our companies and launch labs, both on a national level, and it's like 50-50. Some have applied, some haven't, for different reasons. Sometimes the more heavily VC-backed ones, sometimes the VCs, given ownership, they're not allowed to, but others have and have gotten it pretty quickly. So like that is a topic. I mean, it might be too late at this point, but just an example. So feel free to reach out, and if we can convene a smaller group like with Phase Genomics or whoever wants to participate, I'm happy to try and help in that regard.
Yeah, and I realize I'm not on the panel, but having organized, I would also add regarding, involvement in the community. Generally around Seattle, my impression tends to be if you ask for things, like people want to help. And I don't think that spirit's gone away. I think it just looks differently. And as Alice said, I think it's just, we're all going to need to be creative in this time to engage the community and remain, kind of come out stronger on the other end. So to that end, if you have ideas to make this, ideas around roundtables, I'm happy. This is part of my job. So email me and, we can figure out what it looks like. And, maybe we do these more often, around a specific topic. But, I think engage, if you ask for a meeting, people are typically going to say yes. So put yourself out there.
Yeah, and I agree. I think one of the big elements of what it means to be a startup is that we all came out of scientific training, or I came out of medicine. I didn't have business training, I didn't have legal training, and that's something we all kind of learn on the fly, and there's not really school to go to for that. And the way I've learned a lot of stuff is, I've learned a bunch from Ivan, I've learned a bunch from other people that have done X and Y and Z. Maybe Ivan came up on something first and for him and then told me about it, or vice versa. And so a lot of the people wanting to make startups or be involved in startups, it's all about that discussion, that networking, and you're just not. you don't just start up out of the blue in a vacuum. In the same way with an early investment, it's about interacting with people and getting advice and getting connections. So just like Ivan said, continue to do that. It's just going to be a little more electronic.
Great, and I think, so this will be just we'll do a quick rapid fire answer on this and then we can close out. So another question was, what advice would you have for any founders that have founded their company more recently? We'll say the last 6 months to a year, where not only we're all navigating a pandemic for the first time, but they're also navigating starting a company.
I mean, my advice at this time is probably the same as it would have been beforehand, which is I think the most important thing is to communicate with folks and to talk to people, ask for advice. It's less about like, here's the thing you have to do. It's more about like, don't let it, the shutdown, well, to as much as you can, like inhibit your ability to get help from people. Right? Because that's what you would have been doing. A lot of the value, I mean, nobody knows the story of your particular startup, and advice is always unique to every story. And so really just don't be scared to reach out to people and just to talk, ask questions, whatever. That's really in the early stages, probably the most valuable thing there is.
Yeah, don't be too ambitious. My vote is don't be too ambitious. Don't do things where you're buying a lot of equipment or starting to sign a big expensive lease in a place. Err on the side of doing a little more planning, a little bit more strategy, a little bit more definition of your value and your business proposition. And so you're really ready to hit the ground running more. It's not a great time to raise money now. A lot of VCs are focusing on protecting their existing portfolios rather than going out and trying to shower money around elsewhere. And that doesn't mean you don't have a good idea. It just means everybody kind of wants to see that we get through this first part. So try to run a little bit more cash lean.
Yeah, and I guess just to add to Ivan's point, I think, reaching out is always important, but it's really hard, especially if it's a first meeting, to get the full context. So for me, when I meet with companies, it's like, if you can give me your rationale and thinking, it allows me to kind of calibrate to what you've already done. Because if you ask me something and I start rattling off a bunch of stuff and you already know like 80% of it, that's not necessarily a good use of time. So it's more like set the parameters and kind of set the guide rails so that whatever advice you get actually is helpful advice, and not just like, talking.
Great. Okay. Well, we're a couple minutes over, but I'll call that successful. So thank you for everyone who attended today. Thank you to our panelists. You'll be getting an email from me. I think the question regarding engaging in the startup community is pertinent, and so we'll be, we're navigating this. So you'll be getting an email from me just with some follow-ups. And like I said, please go to Genome Startup Day to, learn about other events. We're hoping to hold our annual event, like I said, September, October. So
people who ask questions that we weren't able to get to. I know there's one that was directly to Ivan and Jessie.
Yes. Yeah. We'll get to those. And I think also whoever asked about the PPP, I also did these applications, so can also provide a personal saga of that. So like I said, ask questions and engage with us, and that's why we're doing these things. So thank you to everyone, and have a great night.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.